Eleanor West stood motionless on the sidewalk, watching as the last of her possessions disappeared into the small moving truck. 30 years as a nurse, 26 years of marriage, and now, at 58, everything she owned fit into a vehicle not much larger than a bread box. The Chicago wind whipped around her, carrying the scent of coming rain and the finality of endings. Have you ever felt your life was over, only to discover it had barely begun? 5 years had passed since Robert's heart gave out in his sleep. 10 years since the accident that took Emily, their only daughter. Eleanor's fingers instinctively found the small pendant at her throat. Emily's birthstone set in silver. Some wounds never truly heal. They just become part of who you are. "Everything's loaded, Mrs. West," called the driver. "You sure about this address in Montana? It's practically the middle of nowhere." Eleanor nodded, clutching the letter that had arrived 3 weeks ago. Thick cream paper, formal letterhead, words that had turned her world upside down. "We regret to inform you of the passing of Margaret Reed, who has named you sole beneficiary of her estate." Margaret Reed, a great-aunt she'd never met. A stranger who had left her 40 acres of land with a cabin and a lake in a place called Whisper Valley, Montana. Inside the envelope had been a second letter, handwritten in elegant script. "Eleanor, when everything seems lost, sometimes all we need is a new beginning where the soul can heal. The lake has been waiting for you. Margaret." "I'm sure," she said, tucking the letter away. "It's time for something new." The mountains rose like sentinels against the vast Montana sky as Eleanor's rental car wound along roads that grew narrower with each passing mile. After 3 days of driving, the landscape had transformed from urban sprawl to rolling farmland, and finally to this: wilderness that seemed to breathe with ancient secrets. Whisper Valley appeared suddenly around a bend, a collection of weathered buildings nestled in a valley surrounded by pine-covered hills. Main Street was lined with storefronts that looked unchanged since the 1950s. A handful of locals paused to watch her car pass, their expressions curious but not unwelcoming. Eleanor pulled into a space outside Jensen's general store, its windows displaying everything from fishing tackle to homemade quilts. The bell above the door jangled as she entered. "Well now, you must be Eleanor West." Behind the counter stood a woman in her early 60s, silver hair cut in a practical bob, eyes bright with intelligence. "Word travels fast," Eleanor said. 800 people, honey. We don't get many newcomers." The woman extended her hand. "Shirley Jensen. I knew Margaret for 40 years. Did you know she was my aunt? Because I certainly didn't." Shirley's expression softened. Margaret kept to herself, but she watched over her family from afar. "Coffee?" Minutes later, they sat in worn chairs by the pot-bellied stove, steam rising from thick ceramic mugs. "Margaret never had children of her own," Shirley explained. "But she followed your life through newspaper clippings, graduation announcements. She knew about your nursing career, your marriage, and—" She hesitated. "About Emily." Eleanor's fingers tightened around her mug. "How?" "Family was everything to Margaret, even family she couldn't claim." "There's more to the story, but it's not mine to tell." Shirley leaned forward. "The property is beautiful. Reed Lake, we call it. But people around here, they say the lake has properties." "Properties?" "Some say it shows you things you need to see." Shirley's voice dropped. "Not everyone is ready to face what it reveals." Eleanor thought of Margaret's letter. "The lake has been waiting for you. The turnoff to your property is marked with a weathered mailbox. Can't miss it." Shirley stood, signaling the conversation was ending. "Oh, and Eleanor, Samuel Blackwood might come calling. He's been trying to buy that land for years." "I'd hear him out, but remember, Margaret had her reasons for keeping it away from him." The cabin stood on a gentle rise overlooking the lake, its weathered logs silvered with age. Not grand, but solid, built to withstand harsh Montana winters and the passage of time. Eleanor stood on the porch, key in hand, taking in the spectacular view. Reed Lake stretched before her, dark blue water reflecting the endless sky. Pine trees lined the shore, their scent carried on the breeze. Mountains rose in the distance, still snow-capped though it was late May. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly well-maintained. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, flanked by bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. The kitchen was small but functional, its window facing the lake. A narrow staircase led to a loft bedroom with a patchwork quilt on the bed. Eleanor ran her hand along a shelf, leaving trails in the dust. The space felt both foreign and strangely familiar, as though she'd visited it in dreams. In the bottom drawer of an oak desk, she found an album bound in faded blue cloth. Inside were photographs of a woman she recognized from the funeral home's obituary, Margaret Reed, standing by the lake at different ages. Handwritten notes accompanied many images. Third visitation, stronger this time. Clear connection established at dawn. And more mysteriously, the healing waters speak truths we aren't ready to hear. The crunch of tires on gravel pulled Eleanor from her discoveries. Through the window, she watched a black pickup truck stop in her driveway. A tall man with salt and pepper hair stepped out, his posture rigid with purpose. "Hello," she called from the porch. "Can I help you?" He stopped at the foot of the steps, assessing her with steel-gray eyes. Despite being in his 60s, he moved with the confidence of someone half his age. "Samuel Blackwood. I own Blackwood Resources." He didn't offer his hand. "You must be Margaret's niece." "Great niece, apparently, though I only learned of her existence recently." His mouth twitched. Margaret was selective about her connections. "I've come to make you an offer on this property. I'll pay twice its market value." "I just arrived. The land has been in my family's sights for generations. It adjoins our holdings and contains valuable mineral deposits. You're from Chicago. What use do you have for 40 acres in Montana?" Eleanor felt a flash of irritation. "I haven't decided yet." Samuel's expression hardened. "I've been trying to buy this land for 15 years. Margaret refused every time. She had some romantic notion about the lake having special properties." He gestured dismissively. "I'm offering you a fresh start, Mrs. West. No maintenance, no property taxes, just a substantial bank account to begin your new life anywhere you choose." "I'll think about it," Eleanor said, not bothering to hide her coolness. "Do that." He handed her a business card. "But know this, I've waited a long time for this property. I can be patient a while longer." As his truck disappeared down the drive, Eleanor turned to face the lake. The surface shimmered in the late afternoon sun, inscrutable and waiting. "What are you? And what did Margaret think I would find here? Have you been following this story so far? Where are you listening from? Leave a comment below and subscribe to hear the next part of this tale of hidden powers and healing at Reed Lake. By her third week in Whisper Valley, Eleanor had established a routine. Mornings were for repairs, fixing loose shingles, mending the porch railing, clearing decades of brush from the property. Afternoons were for exploration, walking the perimeter of her 40 acres, discovering hidden meadows and ancient trees. The physical labor felt good after years of apartment living. Her body ached in ways that reminded her she was alive, and for the first time since Robert's death, she slept deeply through the night. In town, she'd made a few connections. Shirley from the general store introduced her around. Most locals were reserved but polite, watching her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You're the talk of the town," said Gloria Martinez as she boxed up cinnamon rolls at her bakery. At 65, Gloria had the energy of someone decades younger, her silver-streaked black hair always perfectly coiffed. No one expected Margaret to leave Reed Lake to an outsider. "I'm hardly an outsider if we're related," Eleanor pointed out. Gloria's eyes twinkled. "Blood doesn't make you local, honey. Time does that." She lowered her voice. "Has the lake shown you anything yet?" Eleanor stilled. "What do you mean?" "People talk about Reed Lake. Say it reflects more than just the sky." Gloria shrugged. "This valley was sacred to the indigenous people long before miners came. The waters were said to thin the veil between worlds." "Between worlds?" "Between the living and those who've passed on." Gloria's expression grew serious. Whisper Valley was booming until the Silver Star mine collapsed in 1902. 27 men died. After that, folks reported seeing their dead at the lake. Not just feelings or impressions, but clear as you and me talking now. Eleanor thought of Margaret's album notations. "You believe this?" I believe there are things science hasn't explained yet. Gloria handed her the box of pastries. The Blackwoods have always tried to dismiss the stories. Their ancestor owned the mine, you know. Some say he ignored safety concerns to increase profits. Samuel seems determined to buy my property. Gloria nodded. The Blackwoods have been buying up land around the lake for generations. Your parcel is the last piece they don't control. Margaret was the only one who refused to sell, said the lake needed to remain accessible, that it had healing to offer. That evening, Eleanor pulled up floorboards in the cabin after noticing one moved slightly underfoot. In a small cavity beneath, she found a leather-bound journal. Margaret's name was inscribed on the first page, the entries spanning decades. Many passages described experiences at the lake, visions, voices, and most disturbing of all, interactions with people who had passed away. But one entry from just months before made Eleanor's blood run cold. April 10th, 2024. I felt Emily's presence again today, stronger than ever. She wants to connect with her mother, but Eleanor isn't ready. The barrier of grief is still too thick. I've made my decision. Eleanor will inherit Reed Lake. Perhaps what I couldn't tell her in life she will discover through the waters. Eleanor closed the journal with trembling hands. How had Margaret known about Emily? And what did she mean by feeling her presence? The next morning dawned misty, the lake a sheet of silver barely visible through the fog. Eleanor walked to the shore, Margaret's journal clutched in her hand. The entries haunted her, raising questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. As she stood at the water's edge, a figure appeared through the mist, a woman, standing silently on the opposite shore. Eleanor squinted, trying to make out details through the fog. "Hello?" she called, her voice swallowed by the thick air. The figure didn't move. There was something familiar in the posture, the way the head tilted slightly. Eleanor took a step into the shallows, drawn forward by an inexplicable pull. "Who's there?" The mist shifted, and the figure was gone, if it had ever been there at all. That night, Eleanor dreamed of Emily. Not Emily as she was in the accident at 23, but Emily as she might have been at 33. Laugh lines around her eyes, a confident set to her shoulders that came with maturity. "Mom," Dream Emily said, her voice achingly familiar. "You found the lake?" "Emily?" Eleanor reached for her daughter, but her hands passed through. "This isn't real." "Not the way you think of real, but it's not nothing either." Emily's eyes, Robert's eyes, looked at her with such love it physically hurt. "Aunt Margaret tried to tell you." "I never knew Margaret." "She knew you. She watched over us." Emily's form began to fade. "The lake connects. It always has. But Samuel knows, and he wants to destroy it." Eleanor woke with a gasp, her cheeks wet with tears. Moonlight streamed through the window, and with a shock, she realized she wasn't in bed. She stood at the lake's edge in her nightgown, water lapping at her bare feet. She had no memory of walking there. The geology department at Montana State University was quiet in summer session. Eleanor followed signs to a small office at the end of a linoleum-floored hallway. The nameplate read, "Dr. James Harrison, Professor Emeritus." The man who looked up from his desk had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the weathered face of someone who'd spent a lifetime outdoors. At about 62, his brown hair was mostly gray, but he moved with energetic precision as he stood to greet her. "Mrs. West, please come in. Margaret spoke of you often." Eleanor paused halfway into a chair. "You knew Margaret?" "We were colleagues and friends for 30 years. He gestured at the framed photographs on his wall. Several showed him and Margaret at various field sites, including Reed Lake. "I specialize in hydrogeology and mineral composition. Margaret consulted me about Reed Lake's unusual properties." "What properties exactly?" James studied her face. "Has the lake shown you anything yet?" Eleanor hesitated, then described the figure in the mist and her sleepwalking episode. She didn't mention the dream of Emily. That felt too private, too raw. James nodded, as if her experiences confirmed something. Reed Lake sits on a unique geological formation. The water contains rare mineral compounds and unusual electromagnetic properties. Scientifically speaking, these could potentially affect human brain activity, creating hallucinations or altered states. That's your scientific explanation? He smiled gently. That's what I publish in peer-reviewed journals. But Margaret and I sometimes discussed alternative interpretations, such as that certain locations can act as conduits between dimensions of existence. His tone remained scholarly, but his eyes held conviction. Margaret believed Reed Lake was one such place, a thin spot between worlds. Eleanor thought of her dream. And you? I've experienced enough at that lake to keep an open mind. He pulled out a map of the region. The real issue is this. Blackwood Resources has been systematically buying land around Reed Lake for decades. They're sitting on geological surveys showing rare earth minerals beneath the lakebed. Samuel offered to buy my property. I'm sure he did. Your parcel is the final piece they need for complete control. James pointed to environmental impact reports. If they drain the lake for mining operations, the entire ecosystem will be destroyed, and whatever makes the lake special will be lost forever. Margaret was trying to prevent this? James nodded. She was gathering evidence for protected status designation. The lake has historical significance, unique biological diversity, and potential scientific importance. He paused. Samuel's father nearly succeeded in acquiring the property in the 1980s, but Margaret discovered the original boundary markers had been moved. Your 40 acres is actually closer to 60. They tried to steal the land? The Blackwoods have always believed the lake belongs to them. Samuel's great-grandfather owned the Silver Star mine. After the collapse, he bought most of the surrounding property, except your parcel. The Reed family refused to sell. Eleanor thought of the journal entries and Gloria's stories. Because of what happened after the mine disaster? The sightings? Partly, but there's more to it. James hesitated. Margaret was gathering historical documents when she died. The timing of her death was concerning to some of us. You think she was? I think the Blackwoods want that land very badly. James met her eyes directly. And I think you should be careful. The town library yielded faded newspaper accounts of the 1902 mine collapse. 27 men lost, families devastated, the town's economy crippled overnight. Subsequent articles reported strange occurrences at Reed Lake, grieving widows and children claiming to have spoken with their lost loved ones at the water's edge. Most interesting was a yellowed photograph of protesters outside the Blackwood mining office in 1903. A sign read, "The lake reveals the truth." Eleanor was so absorbed she didn't notice the library emptying until the elderly librarian touched her shoulder. "We're closing, dear." Driving home, Eleanor's mind raced with questions. Why had Margaret chosen her? What connection did they truly share? And what was the significance of her dream about Emily? As she rounded the final bend to her property, Eleanor slammed on the brakes. 3 vehicles were parked in her driveway, Samuel Blackwood's truck, and 2 others bearing the Blackwood Resources logo. Men in hard hats moved around the lakeshore with surveying equipment. Fury propelled her from the car. "What do you think you're doing?" Samuel turned, unsurprised by her arrival. "Ah, Mrs. West. Just checking some boundary markers." "On my property, without permission?" "There's some question about the exact property line." His tone was smooth, reasonable. Old surveys were notoriously inaccurate. "Or deliberately altered," Eleanor countered, remembering James's words. "I want you off my land. Now." Something dangerous flickered in Samuel's eyes. "I've been patient, Mrs. West. I've offered you a generous sum for worthless wilderness. But my patience has limits. This land isn't worthless, and whatever you're planning for the lake, what I'm planning is progress. Jobs. Economic development for a region that's been stagnating for decades." He stepped closer. "Do you have any idea what's beneath this picturesque lake? Minerals essential for everything from smartphones to electric car batteries, worth millions. And that justifies destroying it? Sentimentality is a luxury, Mrs. West. This valley was built on mining. And 27 men died because of it." Samuel's face hardened. "Ancient history. My offer stands for 1 more week. After that, We do this the hard way. Environmental surveys, road access disputes, water rights challenges. Trust me, you don't want to see how complicated rural property ownership can become. After they left, Eleanor stood at the lake's edge, watching the setting sun turn the water to liquid gold. "What are you?" she whispered to the lake. "And what am I supposed to do?" That night, she dreamed of Emily again. They walked along the lakeshore, the water unnaturally still beside them. "They know about the connection," Emily said. "They want to destroy it so no one can access the truth anymore." "What truth, Emily?" "About the mine, about what happened after." Emily's form seemed more substantial than before, less like a dream and more like something else. "Ask James about Margaret's research, about your real connection to her." Eleanor woke with the first light of dawn, the dream vivid in her mind. This time, she was still in bed, but a sense of urgency propelled her to dress quickly and drive to town. Have you ever felt a connection with someone you've lost? Does this story resonate with your experiences? Leave a comment below and subscribe to our channel to hear the conclusion of Eleanor's journey at Reed Lake. The fire started just after midnight. Eleanor woke to the acrid smell of smoke and the orange glow of flames engulfing her porch. Grabbing only her purse and Margaret's journal, she fled through the back door as the fire spread to the cabin's roof. By the time fire trucks arrived from town, the cabin was beyond saving. Eleanor stood wrapped in a blanket provided by a volunteer firefighter, watching as the structure that had briefly been her home collapsed in on itself. "Gas leak, most likely," said the fire chief, though his expression suggested he didn't believe it. Word spread quickly. By dawn, a dozen townspeople had gathered at the property, bringing coffee, food, and offers of shelter. "You'll stay with me," Gloria insisted, her arm around Eleanor's shoulders. "No arguments." As cleanup began, Shirley approached with a steel lockbox, its sides blackened but intact. "Found this under the floorboards in what was the back bedroom. It survived." Inside, protected from the flames, lay a sealed envelope addressed simply, "Eleanor." Margaret's handwriting. Eleanor's hands trembled as she opened it, unfolding several pages of elegant script. "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, I am gone, and you have come to Reed Lake. There are truths you must know, truths I was too much a coward to share in life. I am not your great-aunt. I am your mother's sister, her younger sister, separated when we were placed in different foster homes after our parents' death. I was just 7, Evelyn 9. By the time I found her again, she had married and had you. I watched from afar as you grew, too afraid to disrupt your life with my sudden appearance. When your mother passed, I still kept my distance, thinking it too late to forge a connection. Then Emily died, and I felt your grief as my own. The lake showed her to me, vibrant, loving, caught between worlds. She spoke of you, of your pain, of your need to find peace. Reed Lake has always been a threshold. The indigenous people knew it first. Then came the miners and the disaster that claimed so many lives. The lake revealed the truth then, that corners had been cut, that warnings had been ignored, that the Blackwood patriarch had sacrificed lives for profit. The Blackwoods have spent generations trying to acquire this land, to silence the lake's voice forever. They fear what it might still reveal about their family's past and present. The water's power is real, Eleanor. Not mystical, but not entirely explainable by science either. Something in its mineral composition, something in the electromagnetic field of this valley, creates a conduit. The lake doesn't show us what we want to see. It shows us what we need to heal. Forgive me for not coming to you in life. Know that I loved you from afar, as I came to love Emily through our strange connections at the lake. All my research is in the steel box, including evidence of the Blackwoods' attempts to steal portions of this land through falsified surveys. The lake is yours now. Trust what it shows you. With all my love, your Aunt Margaret. Eleanor read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. She had family she'd never known. Margaret had been her aunt, had known and loved Emily, had protected this place for reasons that went beyond mere conservation. "Eleanor," James's voice broke through her thoughts. He'd arrived with the other volunteers and now stood beside her, concern etched on his face. Are you all right? Did you know? She held up the letter. About Margaret being my aunt? He nodded slowly. She swore me to secrecy, said it was her story to tell, not mine. In the remains of the cabin, volunteers sorted through debris, salvaging what little had survived the flames. Eleanor watched them, these strangers who had become allies in a matter of weeks. I need to see the lake, she said suddenly. Alone. Dawn was breaking as Eleanor walked to the water's edge. The lake was perfectly still, reflecting the pink-streaked sky like a mirror. She felt drawn forward, stepping into the shallows, the cool water seeping into her shoes. Emily? She whispered. Are you here? The surface rippled, though there was no wind. Then, like a photograph developing, a figure appeared on the water. Emily, exactly as she'd been in Eleanor's dreams. Mom! Her voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. You've been holding on to so much pain. I miss you every day, Eleanor's voice broke. It should have been me in that car. No. Emily's image solidified. My life was short but full. Yours still has chapters to be written. Eleanor reached out, knowing she couldn't touch her daughter but unable to stop herself. I don't know how to let you go. Letting go isn't forgetting, Emily said gently. It's carrying me differently. I'm always with you. But you belong in the world of the living. The Blackwoods, they want to destroy this place. Then don't let them. Emily's image began to fade. Margaret protected it for decades. Now it's your turn. Emily, wait. Find your strength, Mom. It's always been there. Her voice grew distant. I love you. That never changes. Then she was gone, leaving only ripples on the lake's surface. Eleanor stood in the water, tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in 10 years, they weren't tears of despair. Something had shifted inside her, a loosening of the grief that had defined her for so long. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a purpose. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor witnessed subtle changes in Samuel Blackwood. At town council meetings, his usual commanding presence seemed subdued. Twice she caught him standing at the edge of her property, staring at the lake with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Not anger or calculation, but something closer to longing. Gloria noticed it too. That man's wrestling with something, she observed one evening as they sat on her porch. My late husband looked the same way before he finally admitted he needed heart surgery, like a man fighting a battle only he could see. Eleanor had been staying in Gloria's guest room while planning the rebuild. The community had rallied around her, donating materials and labor. Tom Jenkins, a retired architect, drew up plans for a new cabin, larger than the original, with a wraparound porch and wide windows facing the lake. Not just a home, he explained, spreading blueprints across Gloria's kitchen table. A place for healing. The idea took root. What if the cabin became more than her personal sanctuary? What if others could experience the lake's unique properties? James helped her sift through the documents recovered from Margaret's fireproof box. Scientific analyses of the water, historical records, even a partially completed application for heritage site designation. Together, they resumed Margaret's work, gathering evidence to protect Reed Lake permanently. Word spread beyond Whisper Valley. A reporter from the Helena newspaper wrote a feature on the lake's history and supposed phenomena. A professor of indigenous studies from the university arrived to document oral histories from local tribal elders about the sacred waters. The town hall was packed for the special hearing on Blackwood Resources' petition to rezone the Reed Lake area for industrial use. Environmental activists from the state university sat alongside local residents, tension filling the air. Samuel Blackwood presented first, his slideshow highlighting job creation and economic benefits. Yet something had changed in his delivery. The passionate certainty had given way to a mechanical recitation of facts and figures. When questioned about environmental impacts, his answers lacked their usual conviction. Progress can't be stopped, he concluded, though the words sounded hollow. Especially not by superstition and sentimentality. When Eleanor's turn came, she approached the podium with quiet determination. My name is Eleanor West. 3 months ago, I was a stranger here. Today, I stand before you as the protector of Reed Lake, She placed Margaret's research on the table. This land has historical, ecological, and cultural significance that far outweighs any short-term profit from mining. She detailed Margaret's findings, the unique mineral composition of the lake, its role as habitat for endangered species, the historical significance of the area to indigenous peoples. But there's something more, she continued, her voice strengthening. Something harder to quantify but no less real. She looked directly at Samuel. Reed Lake connects us to what we've lost. Whether through science or something beyond our understanding, it helps us heal. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as townsfolk stood to share their own experiences at the lake. Moments of clarity, unexpected peace, even encounters with loved ones long gone. James presented the scientific data Margaret had collected, making the case for protected status designation. Gloria spoke of the lake's importance to the town's identity and potential for heritage tourism. Through it all, Samuel Blackwood sat stone-faced, his eyes never leaving Eleanor. When everyone had spoken, the committee chair called for final statements. Samuel rose, but instead of approaching the podium, he stood at his seat, looking suddenly older and wearier. "My wife, Catherine, died 15 years ago," he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Cancer. It was quick and brutal." He paused, seeming to struggle with himself. 3 months after her death, I went to Reed Lake at sunset. I was angry, planning to drain it, mine it, erase it from existence. The room was utterly silent. Catherine was there, he continued, not a hallucination or a dream. She told me things only she could know, asked me to wait, to reconsider. His shoulders sagged. I've spent 15 years trying to rationalize what happened, to convince myself it wasn't real. Because if it was real, he looked directly at Eleanor. If it was real, what we're planning to do is unforgivable. His confession changed everything. The committee unanimously rejected the rezoning petition. Samuel withdrew Blackwood Resources' interest in the property entirely, stunning the business community. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor often saw him walking the perimeter of the lake, alone with his thoughts. She gave him space, understanding that some healing journeys needed solitude. One evening, as she inspected the progress on the new cabin, Samuel appeared on the path leading from the road. He carried a folder of documents. "Mrs. West," he called, his tone formal but not unfriendly. "May I speak with you?" They sat on makeshift benches overlooking the construction site. Samuel handed her the folder. Inside were land deeds for the surrounding properties, all owned by Blackwood Resources. "I'm transferring them to a conservation trust," he said simply, "with stipulations that the lake remains accessible to the public." Catherine would have wanted that. Eleanor studied him, seeing the grief etched in the lines of his face. "The lake showed you your wife." "Many times over the years." He looked out over the water, golden in the setting sun. "I fought it. Told myself it was grief, imagination, some trick of the mind. I wanted to destroy the lake rather than face what it offered." Which was? The chance to truly say goodbye. His hands tightened on his knees. "The last time I saw her there, she told me I needed to stop hiding behind anger, that I needed to let others find the peace I'd rejected." 6 months after the fire, a new structure stood on the rise overlooking Reed Lake. Not just a cabin, but the Whisper Valley Healing Retreat. The main building featured wide windows facing the water, a stone fireplace echoing the original cabin's design, and 6 comfortable guest rooms. Eleanor had used her nursing background to create a sanctuary for those dealing with grief and loss. People came from across the state, some skeptical, some desperate for connection. Not everyone experienced the lake's unique properties, but many found a measure of peace simply from the tranquil setting and compassionate community. Martha Collins, a widow from Billings, was the first to report seeing her late husband at the water's edge. "He told me to sell the house," she said, eyes bright with tears and wonder. "That I've been holding on to it like I've been holding on to grief." As if letting go meant forgetting. Richard Jenkins, a father who'd lost his son to opioid addiction, spent hours by the lake, returning with reddened eyes but lighter shoulders. I didn't see him, he admitted, but I felt forgiven, like he knows I did my best. Samuel Blackwood became an unexpected ally. He established the Reed Lake Foundation, funding research into the water's unique properties, both scientific and metaphysical. The hostility that had defined him melted into purpose. Occasionally, Eleanor would spot him at dawn, sitting silently by the water, in communion with something or someone only he could see. The town of Whisper Valley began to transform as well. Tourism increased, but the kind that respected the sanctity of the place. Gloria's Bakery expanded, hiring 2 local girls. Shirley's General Store added a section of locally made crafts. The old mining town found new life centered around healing rather than extraction. 1 year after her arrival, Eleanor sat on the porch of her new home, watching the sunset paint the lake in gold and crimson. In her lap lay a journal, her own this time, filled with accounts of the lake's phenomena and the stories of those who came seeking healing. She wrote a final entry for the day. Sometimes life gives us its greatest gift through its deepest pain. I came to Whisper Valley broken, seeking only escape. Instead, I found purpose, community, and a different way to carry my grief. The lake didn't take away my loss. It taught me to transform it into something that helps others. Emily remains with me, not as a wound, but as a light. Margaret watches over this place still, I believe. And I have found my place in the world again, not despite my losses, but because of how they've shaped me. This morning, Samuel told me Catherine hasn't appeared to him in months. I think she's at peace, he said, knowing the lake is safe, knowing I've found a way forward. There was no sadness in his voice, only quiet acceptance. That's what the lake truly offers, not endless connection with those we've lost, but the chance to say what needs saying, to find the peace that allows us to live fully in this world while honoring those who've passed to another. In the lake's reflection, stars began to appear, mirrored perfectly in the still water. Among them, Eleanor sometimes imagined she could see Emily's smile. We all have wounds that need healing, loved ones we miss with every breath. Sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live with the love that remains in our hearts. Where is your healing place? Share in the comments below, and subscribe to hear more stories of hope, connection, and the journey through grief to new beginnings.